got to be frustrating.
Thank you.
if they-
I'll now call the City Planning Commission meeting to order for Tuesday, November 21st. And can I get a confirmation that the Kansas Open Meeting Act has been properly provided?
Let's see if Margie is unmuted.
I think you're muted, Margie.
I can confirm that the packet was posted and the required notice was provided.
Okay, thank you, Margie, and I hope you get to feeling better.
Thank you.
Could I get a roll call, please?
I'm going to call roll. Commissioner Farber, Commissioner Ivy,
Here.
Commissioner Alt, Commissioner Smith,
Here.
Commissioner Van Coveren,
Here.
Commissioner Sydow,
Here.
Chair Mike Sell, Vice Chair Waters.
Here?
Okay, so we have, with the appointment of Mr. Smith as our 8th Planning Commissioner member, we have now, our quorum has moved from 4 to 5, and we do have 5 commissioners present, and having provided public notice of today's meeting, we can now move ahead with today's agenda.
Okay, thank you, Dean, and welcome again, Matt,
Thank you.
to the commission. Could I have an approval of the minutes of the November 7th meeting?
I move we approve the minutes from November 7th.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It has been moved to second to approve the meeting minutes from November 7th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you. New business, 3.1.
We have a couple public hearing items for you this afternoon. The first one is a conditional use permit, which is a quasi-judicial action, and then we have a text amendment following that, which is a legislative matter. But item 3.1 is a conditional use permit application filed by Jeff Mays of Compro Realty. And the request is approval of a conditional use permit to allow a drinking establishment in the C4 Central Business District. And the location is what some would refer to as the old Ad Astra or former Ad Astra bookstore building. It is addressed as 141 North Santa Fe. And before we get into our report and overview, I wanted to call your attention to some things that are attached to the back of the 8-page staff report, just because we attached those separately. So attached to our staff report today, there's a separate background staff report, and the purpose of that staff report is to explain how and why and when conditional use permits became a requirement for drinking establishments in the downtown area. And just by way of an understanding of the laws in the vast majority of states, the issuance of liquor licenses or drinking establishment licenses is the purview of individual cities. And in Kansas, that is not the case. That is a power that the state of Kansas through ABC holds on to itself. So if you had a case in the city of Topeka and you had a bar that was causing lots of problems for neighbors or for the Topeka Police Department or things like that, the Topeka City Council would not have the authority to pull that establishment's liquor license because only the state can do it. So what a number of communities have done is they have required conditional use permits for drinking establishments because a conditional use permit can be revoked, whereas a liquor license cannot. And so the city of Lawrence and other communities took that approach and have been taking that approach because the state of Kansas won't relinquish its control of drinking establishment licensing. And so that report just provides you with some background as to when and why conditional use permits were required And the rationale for that is that a conditional use permit can be revoked, whereas the city can't revoke someone's liquor license or drinking establishment license. The second thing that's in there is a letter with comments from Salina Downtown Inc. and the Board of Advisors. And the Board of Advisors was one of the groups that was involved in the decision to make drinking establishments in the C4 district a conditional use. So they customarily comment on applications received. So you'll find in your packet comments that were received from the SDI Board of Advisors. And then before we took the packet and sent it out, we received what we've described as a protest petition. It was submitted on behalf of Recovery Cove. And so if you've been around this property, 141 North Santa Fe, you'll note that there's an arcade, covered arcade that's on the south side of it that goes between Santa Fe and 7th Street. And inside that arcade is an entrance to some meeting rooms, where Recovery Cove has its meetings. And so the reference there is to Recovery Cove is the closest neighbor to 141 North Santa Fe, and its meetings are held in a space that is accessed through that arcade. And so they have submitted that petition. We labeled it as a protest petition because it's protesting approval of this application, but we wanted to make clear that there's protest petitions that provide a sense of how people feel about an application, and then there's a legal term for a protest petition. And for a protest petition to be a legal petition, it has to be signed by at least 20% of the owners of record that are within 200 feet of the request area. And this is not intended to be that, and is not that, is just a sense of their response to being notified of this application. Then the two other things that we have attached are the City Planning Commission adopted a policy resolution that says, as we review drinking establishments in the downtown area, we're going to use this criteria, and we're going to try to have the application address all those points. And so Planning Commission Policy 01-01 is attached just for your information. And finally, attached before the maps is attachment number 3, and that just highlights the factors that the commission is supposed to review. And so at the end of that handout, it says, in granting a conditional use permit, the commission may impose appropriate conditions and safeguards, including but not limited to planting screens, fencing, construction commencement and completion dates, lighting, operational controls, hours of operation, duration of a use, access restrictions, parking requirements, draining facilities, or any other requirement which the commission deems appropriate upon finding that they are necessary to fulfill the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. So the term conditional use means it's a use that's allowed, and it can be allowed subject to certain conditions or limitations. So that attachment there is just to advise the commission that you have the discretion on a conditional use permit to impose conditions or safeguards you think make the use fit better. So that's kind of a summary of the things. It's like, well, there's a lot of things attached to this packet, so I just wanted to explain, call your attention to those things and why they were in there. So in terms of the main report, we're talking about the property that's on the south side of a public parking lot on the west side of North Santa Fe, just south of Ash. It's the first building in from Ash Street. It's somewhat unusual from the standpoint that it occupies Lot 88, and the south 27 feet of Lot 88 is occupied by this building, and the north 23 feet of Lot 88 is owned by the city, and that's where we have what would be called the City Lights Plaza or City Lights Parklet. That is just to the north, and so that used to be just a vacant, kind of overgrown area, and that's been turned into a parklet. But the reason for that is that little strip of land between the north wall of this building and the parking lot is owned by the city, and there were some inspiration to do something there besides just having it be vacant and grassy. So that has been added to that, but that is, most of our storefronts downtown are 50 feet wide. This is 27.25 feet wide. The owner of the property is Big Notes Kate's LLC, and the proposed project name or establishment name is The Groove. And so we have talked about the surrounding area. You have the City Lights Plaza and City Lights Stage to the north. There's a covered arcade directly to the south, and then a single-story storefront, and then the relocated Ad Astra bookstore is to the south. Across the street, you have the branch campus of the medical school, and then directly behind the alley, you have the Eagles Lodge and Cox Cable. According to our records, the building on this lot was originally built in 1902. It had a number of retail uses, and then for 16 years it was used by Richard Bergen as a sculpture studio. And then in 1997 it was modified and remodeled and became the location of Tailgater's Sports Bar and Grill, and then later Nacho Mama's, and then later the Ice Bar and Lounge. And so then we had the bookstore open in this location in November 2011 and has been there until recently, and so the property is currently vacant. In 2017, there was a mural sign. The Salina 67401 mural sign was painted on the north wall of the building. And in 2019, work was begun on the plaza or parklet on the north side of the building. And then in 2021, the former stage that was located in Campbell Plaza was relocated to the corner of Santa Fe and Ash. So there have been a lot of changes in the surrounding area. The application is before you is to occupy this space with a bar or nightclub to be known as the Groove. As proposed, this establishment would have a bar and a dance floor at the front of the building, but no kitchen or food service. The proposed hours of operation would be Thursday through Saturday from 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. And the main floor of this building contains between 3,000 and 3,300 square feet of usable space. With the kitchen and restroom space and all, it's probably a little less than 3,000 square feet. As we noted in our report, in 2001, because of potential impacts on neighboring properties, the Downtown Board of Advisors and the City Commission determined that proposed drinking establishment locations and outdoor patios should be reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission. And so that required neighborhood notice, which we provided, a public hearing, which we're holding today, and approval of a conditional use permit. And so, as we noted, there's about 3,000 square feet of interior space. Some of that's taken up by a kitchen area that's not proposed to be used, and existing restrooms. If you look at the plan there, you have a bar along the south wall. There's a dance floor with dance cages at the front of the bar and tables and chairs along the north wall. We're not seeing any pool tables or game areas or anything like that. As we noted, there was a functioning kitchen in this building when it was Tailgaters and Nacho Mamas, but that there's no plans to have a kitchen or food service. And this building has front and rear exits, one on the alley, one on Santa Fe. Mr. Leister also operates Chuck's Bar on North Santa Fe, Speakeasies on South Ohio, and Big Nose Kate's downtown. Chuck's and Speakeasies have food service. Big Nose Kate's does not. So under state law, this location would require a drinking establishment license, and due to its location, a conditional use permit application must be reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission prior to the issuance of a liquor license. Just so before we go further, if someone is seeking a liquor license, doesn't matter whether it's downtown or any other location, that license application is presented to me as the zoning administrator, and I have to sign off on it saying that the location has proper zoning approval to open an establishment there. And so in the case where a conditional use permit is required, I don't have the authority to sign that unless the Planning Commission has approved that location. So so your role today is to review the nature of this establishment, determine whether the addition of a bar in this location would have a negative impact on the public or surrounding property. So I'm sure that you are aware our downtown is a lot more vibrant and active than it was a few years ago. The C4 district allows a wide variety of commercial uses, and then it has a number of uses that are allowed only as conditional uses, and a drinking establishment is one of those. One thing we did do in 2008 was that the original action in 2001 was anything that downtown where they wanted to sell or serve alcohol required a conditional use permit, and so even restaurants like Ya-Ya's or Martinelli's would have had to have gotten conditional use permits. That was modified in 2008 so that only establishments that serve alcohol and don't have a commercial kitchen or food service have to get a conditional use permit. So a C4 district allows 100% of a lot to be covered by building. It does not require businesses to provide their own parking. They can make use of public parking. And so this building sits on the property line on both sides. It's bordered by a public alley on the west, a street on the east, and an arcade on the south, and city-owned property on the north. And so, as we noted, the C4 district itself doesn't have specific requirements for drinking establishments, but you, as a body, had adopted criteria for evaluating these kinds of proposals. So, again, the hours of operation would be 7 to 2, Thursday through Saturday. And so, in terms of making downtown an entertainment area or entertainment district, adding another drinking establishment could provide an additional post-show gathering space for people who are attending events or other venues downtown. It would strengthen the image of downtown as an entertainment district. On the other side of the coin, if it's not properly managed or supervised, a drinking establishment can possibly provide a location for negative activities, overconsumption of alcohol, noise, littering, vandalism, those types of things. So the other thing that comes into play is when you have a large assembly space where people are crowded together, then making sure you have adequate exiting and smoke detectors, and in some cases sprinkling. That's one fact that staff was not able to tell from the records, is we can't tell you whether this building is fully sprinkled or not. Perhaps the applicant can address that at some point. But I think you're familiar with the surrounding area. Again, we have the KU Medical School. We have the new location of the Ad Astra Bookstore. We have the City Plaza, City Lights Plaza and Stage. And if you look at those spaces, they're not likely to be active. It's very unlikely that we're going to have public events at the same time as the Groove is most active due to the late night hours of the establishment. We have a arcade that buffers this directly from the building to the south. There is a loft apartment above the Ad Astra Bookstore, and that's the closest residential loft to this drinking establishment that staff has been able to identify. So the 100 block is already an active block. You have Big Nose Kate's, you have Blue Sky, and a number of other establishments in this block. And so by way of comparison, the Groove as proposed is less than half the size of what Big Nose Kate's is, both as to footprint and as to occupancy. As of the date of this report, we hadn't received any comments or written feedback from neighboring property owners. We did receive comments from the SDI Board of Advisors, which are attached, and while those are generally supportive, they did express concern about some external impacts. As we noted when I wrote this report, we had not heard anything from neighboring owners, and we got the petition that's attached from Recovery Cove right as our packet was going out. One question we did want to ask the applicant is if there was any plans to rent this space out for private rental events or for other events other than the requested operating hours of 7 to 2 Thursday through Saturday. Again, all the utilities are in place. This has previously been used for similar uses. We would request the applicant to clarify whether the building is sprinkled or not. As we noted, we don't require drinking establishments to provide their own parking. Parking is available along Santa Fe. There's also public parking lots in the vicinity. And we don't think a drinking establishment in this location should impact parking, because when this would have its peak level of activity, most of the surrounding businesses would be closed. And conversely, this will not be open on weekdays during peak retail business hours, and it's not going to compete with events that are held at the City Lights stage. So to summarize, we're looking at about 3,000 square feet of serving area and an occupant load of about 150. No kitchen or food preparation. This would have a dance floor that could also serve as a stage for live music if the owner so desires. There's no outdoor patio or serving area. There's no plans to create a north-facing doorway or tie in with the plaza to the north. The operating hours are Thursday through Saturday. The closest church, school, or youth activity center is the City Youth Center on 7th Street and the First Methodist Church. And then we have second floor lofts in the Ad Astra building and across the street to the east. And in terms of our distances to the closest drinking establishments, it's 200 feet from Big Nose Kate's, 250 to Blue Sky Brewery, and 520 feet from the Paramount. So as you look at the information you have in front of you and the guidelines you're to apply, and if you conclude that this would not have a negative impact on surrounding businesses and properties, then you could approve the conditional use permit as requested without any special conditions if the above noted findings can be made. You could approve the application subject to any conditions or revisions to the plans that you think are appropriate. You could postpone consideration of this application if you think you don't have enough information to take action, or you could deny the application if you don't think that the required findings supporting a conditional use permit could be made, or you think this is incompatible with the surrounding neighborhood. On page 8 of your report, if you choose to approve this application, we would recommend it be made subject to the 5 conditions, or the 4 conditions identified on page 8, and any other conditions or limitations that you might come up with as a body. But we've given you maps, lists, we've given you quite a bit of things there for you to look through. And so I would pause to see if you have any questions about this application for staff, or if you would like to see any of the attachments or graphics on the screen again. But again, it's a fairly large packet, but we just wanted to give you all the background information that we could.
Okay, thank you, Dean. Do any of the commissioners have questions of staff?
Dean, I have a question. You've got on the 5 recommendations on page 8 to have somebody in the front and rear entries from midnight until closing time. Do they do that at other bars?
That was a carryover from the conditional use permit approved for Big Nose Kate's.
Okay.
And so that was a condition that the Planning Commission placed on that. Some could say that doesn't need to be a condition, that should be implied, but that was just carried over from that action that was taken on the conditional use permit for Big Nose Kate's, and that was a request from the Salina Police Department. And so that, again, that could be left out at your discretion, and you could decide, well, that's implied that every bar owner operator should have to take care of that themselves, but that is just a reinforcing condition that's basically saying this is what our expectation is. But that is a carryover from what was required in other conditional use permits downtown.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for staff? Hearing none, would the applicant like to present, please?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Jeff Mace, Compro Realty, 157 South 7th. I'm here on behalf of Big Nose Kate's. Thank you for your time this afternoon. A little bit of housekeeping before I get started. One of the things that was in the report, and it's not largely known, but Big Nose Kate's is the landlord. Mr. Leister's applied as the landlord with the idea that he would put a tenant in place if the conditional use permit would be the actual liquor license at Chuck's or Speakeasy, and in this case, the Groove would be with another entity. In this case, it'd be his son-in-law, so it's closely, mom's on the liquor license, so it's a family affair, but Rusty serves only as a landlord, and so I'm just clearing that up from a staff report. I don't know that it makes a heck of a lot of difference, but that's the reality. Another thing that has come up since we made the application, it has been suggested to them that maybe a Wednesday night would be better than Thursday night for conflicting activity within the community. It would be 3 nights a week only, but he did ask me to convey with you all and staff, get their feedback if it would be a problem. If it was Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday, he's not asking for 4 nights a week. He doesn't frankly want to operate it 4 nights a week just because of the supposed demand. But his request would be if it's better on a Wednesday night or it's less conflicting with other activity, be it downtown or whatever, he'd like to have the ability to be open 3 nights a week, Wednesday through Saturday. He's going to be open for sure Friday or Saturday, but just that Wednesday or Thursday. So I don't know how you feel about that, but that was a request that he asked that I bring forward here this afternoon.
One way that could be addressed would be to have a condition that just says that can operate 3 nights a week, and just in that condition say Wednesday or Thursday and Friday and Saturday, and just have that as part of your action if that's what you desire.
I don't know how y'all feel if there's a, one way or the other towards that, but that was requested. This all came about for a couple reasons. One, they operate, and this is a need that has been, with Rusty's involvement in the businesses that he's been asked for, a dance club, a nightclub that we don't have, and we have ropers from a country and western perspective, but nothing on a more traditional dance club environment. So he had been approached a number of times. That coupled with the idea that the property had been vacant. And we've had a number of folks in there. We've been unable to tenant it. So this is him being able to put his property into production. It's been vacant roughly 8 months, and he came up with this idea by virtue of talking to folks, and so that's kind of where it was born. We do feel like it's a need that's not being satisfied in Salina, truly in any way. Although it is our understanding that the point that recently got a CUP has a DJ and is now having dancing. I don't know that personally, but he shared that with me today. But relative to staff questions, no, the property is currently not sprinkled. We have Jones Gillum Wrens preparing plans. Of course, there's building code that addresses that. And, if the building is required to be sprinkled, we obviously would sprinkle it. There's no concern either way, or whatever the fire code requires. There's building code that addresses those items based on occupancy and all of that. So we would have no issue in complying with whatever the code requires. There are no private events, no additional nights for, be it company meetings or anything like that. They would just be operating to the public on those given nights. These are addressing the staff's questions. No live music planned. They don't feel like there's enough room to do that anyway, but he has no live music. There's a question around trash service. Yes, privately hauled trash service in the corrals where it was for tailgaters and the ice bar, Ad Astra, et cetera. Big question. We had talked prior to getting staff's comments and just looking at what the observed issues might be. He has full expectation of having door people at both the front and the rear while he's open. Twofold, because most nights I imagine he's going to be collecting entry cover, but also we thought that might help with the idea of anybody walking in and out without with alcoholic beverage in hand or anything like that. So he's fully expecting, and it can be a condition of the CUP. He would have no issue with that if that was a condition of the CUP, that he had staffing on the front and rear doors. So to answer your question, Commissioner, there would be no issue. One of the things that we read in the staff report, and obviously get the question, and this is me here on behalf of the applicant, but me also, I'm a member of Salina Downtown and a dues-paying member of all of that. And the trash and debris is maybe a larger question from my perspective as far as what are we doing to manage trash in the public parking lots. I know Salina Downtown has some efforts in cleaning up and picking up the trash on Santa Fe, taking care of the planters, but I don't really know for sure how are we handling trash and debris on a daily or weekly basis in the public parking lots. Is that something staff could speak to?
Well, I believe it's primarily it's ultimately a city responsibility because it's a city-owned lot, but there has been a position created with SDI to assist with that, but in cases where there's a larger scale broken glass or trash or debris or things like that, it ultimately falls to city staff. I think that's a little bit of the basic purpose of that is just that the owners of establishments, that when they've closed for the week or their weekend, and just to have somebody kind of survey the perimeter just to see what the leftovers are from the weekend's activities. And the first line of defense would be hope that individual businesses will clean up after themselves. And then the second thing, obviously, if it's not done, the City Lights Plaza, the sidewalks, and the alley all belong to the city, so it would be the city's responsibility to clean that up. SDI commented on that, and part of their comment could just as easily be directed to the city, but obviously the SDI is concerned about the image and attractiveness and cleanliness of downtown as it becomes more of an activity center. But again, that is, those are conditions that could be considered to be just implied and not expressed. And so the hope or expectation is that people who operate businesses downtown will not limit their cleanup to just the four walls of their building, but look at the outsides as well. And so that was the purpose of that, and it was in response to the comments we received from SDI. But this is not the only place where we received those comments. There's other parking lots on 7th Street and other locations where the city is responding to requests for cleanup.
Thank you. This is kind of a more 10,000-foot view of how are we handling that. I know with the downtown district and the TIF and the STAR bonds, there are funds out there, and who's responsible for doing what. We do business all over the region. I've done business in Oklahoma City in their district, the Legends, the Plaza, and generally the Salina downtowns of the world, if you will. That's part of the dues that we all pay. I live in an office, but I pick up trash that has nothing to do with old Chicago. I mean, we know where a lot of that's born in both our parking lots and my planter beds on the sidewalks and in the gutters. So I would offer you to think about that on a little higher level. I was shocked. I had a conversation last Friday with Guy Walker at Salina 2020 and addressing this issue overreaching, not just around this permit. Having said all that and shared that with you, the operations of these restaurants, they have people come in the middle of the night to pick, to do restrooms and all that, to get them up and going, carpet and all that. Mr. Leaser has no problem with providing that type of service in the parking lots, that adjacent parking lot to the north and in the rear. Again, I think it's a bigger question for how we're handling our district as a whole relative to the city parking lot. I mean, I get that it's city staff, but they're not working on Saturday and Sundays. So how are we handling that for our overreaching district is an interesting thought. So I think that's all we really had to that. If that, again, needs to be a condition of the CUP, that he provides that until such time that it's handled by the district, that would not be of objection by Mr. Leaster, the applicant. Another note, I think I've answered, is that all the city staff questions?
Yeah, as we were talking about that letter, there was just thing I wanted to point out. The letter makes reference to the Salina 67401 sign, and part of the reason that we didn't address or comment on that is, and I don't think it's fully understood, but people tend to think of that as like it's a public image or it belongs to the public, but that sign belongs to Mr. Leaster, and so we don't think it's appropriate to say anything about damage or tagging or things like that, because it's his sign, it's his building. He gave permission for it to be put on his building, and basically no one can tell him what to do with it. So
we would feel like that's by definition a slippery slope. I mean, who's to say? I came down Saturday morning and Sunday morning just to kind of, in advance of this hearing, to kind of look at the parking lots to see what the condition is before this would be considered. And frankly, I was surprised. I went behind Old Chicago and behind Blue Sky and then behind Big Nose Kate's. And I mean, we certainly found some some folks that are without homes and in this area and all of that. I think it would be very difficult to say, because it gets tagged. I can tell you my office in the alley gets tagged, our door and whatnot gets tagged, and we have to repaint. I'm pretty sure that's not derived from any one of our business operations. So I think that would be very difficult to make it part of the conditional use from our position. So other than that, I know we've considered, again, it's been I've learned, I don't know this for confirmation, but I understand the point is doing something very similar. The property has previously been used for a great number of years as tailgaters, and then for those of you that may or may not know, the ice bar was exactly what Rusty is looking at putting back in there relative, tenanting with it, relative to a dance club. And it operated for a number of years in there. So, I mean, all of those things were pre-existing conditions, so we don't feel like our application is something asking you to think, very far out of the box. It's certainly been used in those ways, and our neighbors are, within that block, we've got a number of other groups that are doing something very similar. I would conclude with one question that came up. The CUP says, can we have a drinking establishment? He can go in there and find a way to serve food and serve 30% food and still operate exactly the same. So my question for you would be, what does food change if he's going to operate a dance club in there from 7 to 2 o'clock 3 nights a week? What does food change if he's working, if the client, everything's going to operate exactly the same way and he doesn't need a CUP? We've got all these other restaurants within that adjacent area, in the Paramount and the Blue Sky, Cozy, all of that right there. I question where's the differentiating factor? Because he can operate with food without request. He's just saying it doesn't make sense from a space perspective from 7 to 2 o'clock in the morning to go in there and be messing with food, and that's why we're before you with the CUP. So be happy to stand for any questions. Otherwise, again, I very much appreciate your time.
Okay. Do any of the fellow commissioners have questions of the applicant?
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to make a comment? Please state your name and address.
Brian Metzger, 432 South Phillips Avenue, Board President of Recovery Cove, speaking on behalf of Recovery Cove. Just want to reiterate what I put in the letter, in the protest, that there's one question in that letter, basically. Do we feel this is a good location for this? The closest neighbor to this location is Recovery Cove. Right on the other side of Recovery Cove is a teen center. A little farther down is a sober living environment, and then you have Big Nose Kate's. And this would sandwich all of those other places directly between two bars, so we don't feel it's a good location.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else present in the room that would like to speak?
I'm Janet Wood, 148 Florida Avenue, here in Salina. I'm treasurer on the board. We've been there in that location since like '96. And one of the things that was happening over time, like Brian was saying, as it being a good fit, no, absolutely not. There's the noise factor. Anything that's going to be loud in there, we won't be able to hear in our meetings. We're going to hear the music. So that's one thing. And safety. I just have a real problem with the safety of, this is a place where addicts and alcoholics go to find recovery. And to have an establishment come right into our back door, I agree with Brian. It's not a good fit at all. I hope that, as a community, we would take that into account, that, these people matter and they need their meetings, and they need to be felt safe. And there are children around also, because people bring their children there. They have no one to leave them with, and so they bring them. So those were the things that I really had issue with, other than the fact that in previous, when it was a bar, people were urinating in our little hall section constantly. And the fountain, I mean, it just was not conducive to us trying to keep what we have, you know, in the city to look nice and presentable, because we followed all of those rules. So that's what I have to say about it. So, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Wood, how many years has Recovery Cove been at this location?
Since 1996.
96, okay, thank you.
We actually bought it from the city, I think.
Okay, all right, thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience present today that wishes to speak? Okay. Dustin?
I can confirm we do not have anyone from the public on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. Yes, yes.
Sorry, I was looking at my notes, and one other thing that struck us too is I believe that in the City Lights Plaza, we're having live music. I believe there are alcohol sales allowed through permit in the plaza. Is that correct?
Through special
Through special
alcohol,
permit.
special event alcohol
Yeah, so
permits.
maybe not weekly, but we've already said we're going to use that as a community area. Certainly respect and understand Recovery Cove and appreciate what all they're doing for our community. You know, with we all know the problems we're having with urinating and all of that going on outside right now without any of that from some of our folks from closing restrooms and whatnot. So anyway, I just wanted to point out that we're already allowing alcohol, bands, concerts in the parking lot to the north already. So thank you again for your time.
All right,
have a
thank you.
question.
Yes. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Mayor, I have a question for you. So, when I'm thinking about, I've been thinking for a little bit.
sorry?
I said when I'm thinking about, I've been thinking about it for a little bit.
Yes, sir.
So we want to kind of, we needed a venue like that for some time here in Salina.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you on that one, but we want to attract the right kind of people.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been thoughts of dress codes or
Yes.
metal detectors or security?
We haven't talked metal detectors. We have very much talked dress code. We've actually looked at some examples of what other folks are doing relative to, there's a fine line there where you're appropriate and where you can get inappropriate, frankly. So, yes, and we've actually, I mean, there was even conversation early on, he was considering age maybe to help with that. We talked about 23, 25, staying away from, and maybe having one night of the 3 nights, 21. He felt like the sole reason he got away from it was only because he felt like we end up with an enforceability issue for the city, the PD, and all that. So he just decided to ask for 21 and under. But he's very sensitive to the idea of how do we secure security. Will be the door people, the doorman, if you will,
Yes.
is the idea, and that's why he's perfectly happy with having the CUP have that requirement front and back.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I open it up to the commissioners for discussion.
Just before you deliberate, I just wanted to clarify 2 things. One, about the subject of grandfathering. So within the downtown area or any commercial property, if a use is abandoned for more than 12 months, then the grandfathering expires. So you are perfectly, as planning commissioners, it's appropriate to look at the fact that this has been used as tailgaters and the ice bar before. The reason it's before you as a conditional use is because the previous drinking establishment uses have been abandoned for more than 12 months, which makes it a new use. The other thing I wanted to clarify, just on the other distinction that is made in the city code about 30% food sales. If you want to have sidewalk dining or serving area, those are only allowed at establishments that have at least 30% food sales. And so there's another distinction in the code. So in other words, if you want to have a sidewalk dining area on the Santa Fe sidewalk, you have to have a kitchen and food sales to have that. And so that's just another distinction that the city code makes between the 30% food sales and not. So with that, you can go on with your discussion. I just wanted to clarify those points.
All right, I open it up for discussion.
I think, I mean, I would agree with the staff recommendations. I also agree, I don't see how you could hold the groove responsible for damage to the mural. Same with the grounds in the area. I get where downtown's coming from, but I don't know, like Mr. May said, it's a broader problem that needs to be addressed. But, yeah, I'm fine with everything here.
Greg, did you have a comment?
I was just curious where their property is compared to the proposed groove.
You're
Do we have an
talking-
overlay of that?
Recovery Cove,
Yeah.
they can explain it better, but as I understand it, the entrance is inside the arcade, the covered arcade. And so it's hard to see from an aerial view, but you have this building, and then next to the building is an arcade that goes through, starts at Santa Fe, goes across the alley and connects to 7th Street. Underneath that roof structure of the arcade, there is a doorway and meeting space inside the arcade. They can explain that better than we can. But that, I think you can see the sign right there. If Dustin zooms in on it, they have a Recovery Cove sign there, but you you actually enter it from inside the arcade.
Okay. Thank you.
Your meetings, as far as Recovery Code, when do they take place?
Every night of the week. On Thursdays, it's at 7 o'clock, and then Friday and Saturday, 8 o'clock at night. And they usually go at least about a couple hours between people coming in and leaving. A lot of times they'll come in an hour earlier also. And then Saturday morning, we have a meeting, and Friday noon, there's also a meeting.
Okay.
So covering those dates, that's what we have going on there.
So in the evening,
And if I may, on the noise that she mentioned,
If you could come to the podium, please, we get your comments in the record.
regarding the noise that Janet mentioned when it was a bar before, if you could go back to that previous picture.
I have to type something real quick. They weren't capturing what they were saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
It shows the breezeway or arcade roof that physically attaches Recovery Cove to that other building. That sound travels right through there, and with the music booming next door, it gets really loud inside the Recovery Cove building.
So Recovery Cove is to the north
Recovery
or the
Cove-
south? South.
To the south.
Okay.
Right. There's that, I call it a breezeway, he calls it an arcade. And the roof connects those two buildings physically, and the sound travels right through that.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, any other discussion among the commissioners? Okay, I bring it back to the commission for a motion.
I would move that we approve conditional use 23-6 with the conditions of the staff recommendations on page 8.
I second that.
To clarify, Jerry, did you want to add in about the Wednesday or Thursday and then Friday and Saturday?
Would we want to add a condition that says they can operate 3 nights a week, Wednesday or Thursday and Friday and Saturday? Give them the Wednesday option?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
So, do I need
So the way that would be is you'd have the conditions listed in the staff report plus a 5th condition that says that the operating days would be Wednesday or Thursday and Friday and Saturday, 7 to 2.
Okay, Greg, are you okay with that
Yes,
as a
I'm okay.
second?
Second.
Okay, it has been brought before the board to approve application CU 23-6 with the staff recommendations on page 8 and including the Wednesday or Thursday evening and then Friday and Saturday. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Nay. Motion carries. Okay, let's move on to legislative matters. 3.2, application Z 23-9.
We have had some ongoing discussions with the Saline County Health Department, the Salina YMCA, and the Salina United Way about their child care initiative, and we've had different discussions about things that are potential regulatory barriers to increasing our daycare capacity. And one of those was dealt with previously this year, where we went in and we had been requiring conditional use permits for daycare providers to move up from licensed to group daycare. And so this commission recommended that group daycare homes no longer be a conditional use, but be a permitted home occupation, just like licensed daycares. And so if someone wants to move up from licensed to group, they would be working with the health department and fire department only, and would not involve a public hearing and coming before this body. And so that change was made. And one of the discussion items that we had involved a program that the Dane Hansen Foundation initiative that they had in the 26 counties that comprise north central and northwest Kansas. And so the Dane Hansen Foundation had contracted with a company in Logan, Kansas, and they were designing and constructing 4 modular homes that were designed to work as group daycare homes. And so they were allowing applicants to submit a request to the foundation to be the recipient of one of those homes. And so when staff was asked whether that would be a possibility, our answer was that the way our ordinance is presently structured, that was not a proposed use that could even be applied for as a conditional use, because although it was designed and built as a dwelling, it wasn't going to be used as a dwelling or as a home. And so we said, well, we have situations in residential zoning districts where, for instance, the Martin Luther King Child Care Center is a child care center. It's in a residential zone, but it's in a non-residential building, or churches are non-residential buildings, or the YMCA is a non-residential building. But the Health Department United Way thought that was problematic because a lot of the state fire marshal standards and KDHE standards for child care centers are more onerous than they would be for a group daycare home. And so the text amendment that we have proposed and for your consideration today would allow a daycare operator either to purchase a home and use it exclusively for daycare and not live there, or it would allow a group to acquire one of these modular homes or a modular home, set it on a vacant residential lot, and use it for a satellite daycare or neighborhood group daycare. And so under this proposal, that would be a conditional use, just like a preschool currently is. And so that would come, any plan with the neighbors would be notified of that, and that could be reviewed by you to see if you thought there was sufficient lot area, that the traffic and parking situation was okay, and that the modular home that was ever proposed to be used would be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. And the city actually does already have, if you want to take a modular home or a residential design manufactured home that's factory built and put it on a lot to live in, we already have aesthetic standards for that so to make sure that those fit in with the existing neighborhood. I think those who are closest to the childcare situation can expand on that, but recent surveys have shown that there are potential daycare providers that might be more inclined to provide daycare services if they were outside of their personal residences and if they were provided with some resources to help them start up their daycare business. And so approval of this would at least provide that as an option, which is not presently in existence today. And so I think one thing we wanted to try to outline in our summary of the differences between an unoccupied and an occupied dwelling is that it's not a common occurrence. We've allowed preschools to be an unoccupied dwelling since 2001, and we've never had a proposal come before this body to do that. There is a preschool at 734 Lewis, and if you drive by there, you can't necessarily tell that it's a preschool. It still looks like a house, but nobody lives there, and it's been in operation there since 1972 and is pre-existing non-conforming. But I did look, and it's been our experience that I looked at the property tax records for that property, and even though it looks like a dwelling, it's classified and taxed as a commercial property. And so the one drawback to this option remains that even if you approve this text amendment, there may be some things in the building and fire code that might need to be amended as well to make this work. But if you would approve this, the one obstacle that can't be overcome, at least presently, is that if it's an unoccupied dwelling, the county appraiser treats it as commercial. Whether if it's occupied, it's residential. And so the difference is you own and live in a home, you're paying taxes on 11.5% of its assessed value. But if it's an unoccupied dwelling, then it's going to be 25% of the assessed valuation, and so there is an additional tax burden on the use of an unoccupied dwelling. So I just full disclosure that this is not a complete, it doesn't address all of those things. And so what this would do is it would add the term group daycare home in an unoccupied dwelling. It would still be a building that was designed and built to be used. And I saw in doing some research on other things that occurred in communities in western Kansas that these were designed so they could be used 100% as daycare. They could be used as daycare plus living, or they could be designed to be used exclusively for living if the daycare operation ceased. So I think that's one of the advantages of it. But your options this afternoon would be to recommend approval of the text amendment as drafted and presented. And what that does is just provides the opportunity to apply for a daycare in a non-occupied dwelling. You could recommend approval of the amendment with any proposed changes that you'd like to see made. You could discuss different alternatives to this amendment. You could postpone it to allow for additional feedback, study, and discussion, or you could take no action. If you were to take no action, that just means that our present ordinance that limits group daycare homes to occupied dwellings would still be in effect. So this text amendment would just provide another option, but would still subject that option to neighborhood notice and an opportunity for this board to review. So with that, I'd be open to any questions. We do have Leanne Montoy from the Health Department and representatives from Salina and United Way if you'd like to get their views on this subject. So.
Are there any questions of staff? Okay. Would either Leanne or Christina like to speak to the commission?
Good afternoon. My name is Christina Small. I work at the United Way at 113 North 7th. And the only comment I want to make is I have friends that have previously been in-home providers, and especially since COVID restrictions have heightened, they stopped doing it because their home no longer felt like their home. Even the stuff that wasn't being necessarily utilized all the time for daycare, there are regulations put in place, so their home was never home. They never really had the chance to leave work. So that was my only piece, really.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Do you care to speak as well? No, okay,
If you have a question, I'm happy to answer.
okay. All right. Dustin, is there anyone online?
We do not have anyone online currently from the public.
Okay, thank you. I open it up to the commissioners for a motion or discussion.
I move we approve application Z 23-9.
Okay, it has been a motion to approve it. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded to approve application Z 23-9. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. All right. I see that we have no administrative items. We do have a preliminary discussion item 3.3 on university district sign regulations.
Yeah, we'd like to have your support and authorization to move forward with a couple of text amendments to the university district. One of them is kind of context specific. The other one is one that is just out of place with all of our other zoning, how we do sign area and other zoning districts. But I was going to let Mr. Hers kind of give you an overview of the Salina VOTEC situation and what we're looking at there, which prompted part of this discussion.
Thank you. So over the last several years, we have had some challenges in administering the sign code for the university district. And some of them are specific to a sign, electronic message center sign, that the Salina VOTEC is looking to, Salina Area Technical College is looking to erect on a monument sign, and some of them are just general issues. So start with the general issues and then move to specific. One of the things that's unique about the university district is the amount of square footage of sign area that's allowed compared to other districts. Most of our other districts allow a certain amount of square footage of sign area per lineal foot of either building frontage or street frontage, and it's usually a multiplier. So for the downtown, for example, we'll allow 3 square feet of sign area per lineal foot of building frontage, and most of our other commercial districts, like a C5 or C7 or C6, we would allow 4 square feet per lineal foot of building frontage. In the university district, we allow 1 square foot per every 6 square feet of building area. So it's completely inverted. In our research, because staff had a sense that perhaps that was a typo or an inversion in the code. We couldn't find where that came from, but it seems to be completely out of balance with what we historically do on other properties. The most similar zoning district to our university district is our public use district, which is what we have for the library, for some of our fire stations, and then also for a lot of the schools. And so the university district does have some similarities to a lot of the schools, and so one of the things we are looking at exploring, if you feel it's a good idea, is looking at what we've done at the schools and what maybe other universities do or other cities do with university districts, but having signage that's more aligned with some of those other uses or other types of zoning districts that we have within the city. So that's kind of a general statement. For the Salina Area Technical College example, we do have 6 reasons why a permit application was not able to be approved when they applied for a permit. And the first is that you have a pre-existing non-conforming sign structure. They have a monument sign that's already in existence, and expanding it because it's pre-existing non-conforming is not something that the code would allow. The second item is that the proposed location does not conform to the setback requirements, and setback requirements in the university district vary based on the size of the sign. And Mr. Michelson, correct me, but I think it's 10 feet unless it meets a certain threshold, and then it has to meet the setback of the principal structures, which is 50 feet. And this would happen to be a sign that would exceed that threshold and would have to have a 50-foot setback requirement. EMC signs, which are electronic message center signs, which is what they're wanting to propose, is a sign category in which historically we have allowed for 50% static image and 50% EMC image. So if you have, let's say, a 32 square foot sign, your EMC could be no more than 16 square feet. And that's with your static sign being 16 square feet as well. And so there's a ratio component that's involved, as well as a maximum size component. And those are some of the problems or issues that we're having with that particular sign permit. The goal of this discussion isn't necessarily to be able to approve their sign, because that may not be what's in the best interest of Salina. It may not be what you or the governing body wants to do in terms of where we end up with our research and any proposed text amendments. But that is one of the genesises for bringing this to you, because we do have an active case in which the university district is being challenging with working with them. So I don't know if that is a too brief summary, but really we're looking at opening the door of having additional discussions with staff as well as you on what the university sign districts should be. And then we can worry about how that applies to the Salina Area Technical College after we get through that.
So what we're looking for is just a motion from commissioners to authorize us to initiate an application that would come back to you for your review and discussion. But in order to move forward on any changes, we just need an authorizing motion from the commission that would authorize us to submit an application on your behalf for consideration at a future meeting.
Okay, any questions of staff? So, Dustin, this is essentially telling staff, do your research, do some more digging into it, I guess.
Yeah.
And then let's get that in place, then we'll go visit about the Salina.
Right, so the Zoning Enabling Act for the state of Kansas, the way that text amendments are initiated is through the Planning Commission.
Okay.
So what this is doing is requesting, gauging your opinion or your consensus on whether or not a text amendment should be explored. Mm-hmm. And in this case, if you decide that, yes, we need to look at exploring and reviewing and possibly changing the university district sign regulations, then what we would do as staff is we would dig into it a little bit more, you're correct, and come up with some ideas or some options and then bring it back to you, and then we'd have discussion about what is appropriate and what are some of the pros and cons to some of the things that we're finding or some ideas that other people have done, and work on crafting code that everyone's comfortable with to make a recommendation to the city commission for their ultimate decision.
Thank you. All right, I open it up to the commissioners for a motion.
I move that we authorize the staff to initiate the application. Is that it?
Z23-.
Z23-9.
Okay, it has been motioned to approve application Z23-9. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. All right. Dean, is there any unfinished or other business?
Don't have any other business to come before you other than to remind you that on December 5th, we have a number of applications associated with the Salina Destination Housing Project that is being proposed on the south side of West Magnolia, directly west of Menards. And that would involve property that's not currently in the city limits, is currently zoned agricultural, and is not platted. And so those plans would be coming before you on the 5th of December, as well as a replat out in the Liberty Edition on South Ohio. And so we will have some important items for you on the 5th of December. As it's looking, it seems unlikely that we will have a meeting on December 19th.
Okay.
So you could get that meeting date off with full pay as usual.
Commissioners, I might ask while we're here, do any of you feel you will not make the December 5th meeting? Okay, just want to make sure that there's a quorum with what we have present today. Okay. Dustin, is there anybody online?
We do not have anyone online from the public.
All right. Okay, commissioners and staff, I'd like to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving, and I would one of the commissioners like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, anyone second it?
Second.
Okay, moved and second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried.